Hello fiber friends, and welcome to another spinning tutorial. In this tutorial, I will show you a core spinning technique to make a coiled yarn using a core and a single. Because I want this yarn to have something extra, I will also be auto wrapping, and then after the yarn is spun, I will ply it with a thread. I have another video where I give a little bit more of a detailed description of what goes on when we're auto wrapping. So make sure and check that out if you're curious for more specific instructions for auto wrapping. To create this yarn, the first thing that you will need is a single. Know that you can get different effects in your coils yarn depending on how your single is spun. If it's spun with slubs in a thick and thin kind of way, you're going to have some thick and thin coils, and it's a great dramatic technique. The single that I have spun that I will be using today, I made out of some alpaca and some silk. It's dyed yellow and orange. I felt like we just needed some bright sunshine today, and boy, does this yarn deliver. Then I also added some locks, some yellow and orange dyed locks. So as I'm working with the single, you're going to see some of it just as a thick and thin with the blend of the silk and the alpaca. And then there are sections where I just lock spun with some of these dyed locks. I think it looks pretty neat, but let's see how it looks in our coils yarn. I'm using my Ashford Elizabeth today with the bulky flyer setup, and as you can see, I barely was able to squeeze everything onto this bobbin. So know that when you spin this yarn, the single is going to shrink down quite a lot in yardage. So the longer single you have to work with, the more yardage you will end up with in your final yarn. To get us going, I'll have to put this onto my Lazy Kate. I'm placing this empty bobbin onto my wheel so that I'm ready to spin. And if you have the option and you're using a scotch tension, I recommend using the largest side of the bobbin. You can see this side has a smaller area to attach the scotch tension band, and this has a larger area. The larger area will give me more control over the friction, and it also has more drag because it has more contact with the bobbin. And for a spin like this, that's what I'll need. All the control and all the tension. On my whirl, I'm using the slowest spin that I can. That means my drive band is going to be placed over the largest whirl and the largest groove that I have. I'm going to place an empty bobbin next to my singles bobbin that I'm using in this spin, and then I'm going to place the core bobbin onto the Lazy Kate. The reason I have an empty bobbin in the middle is to keep these two separate. I don't want them to tangle, and I prefer when they don't bang around and slide around on my Lazy Kate. This core that I'm using is a cotton core, and it has been pre-twisted. Now that I have my Lazy Kate set up and my empty bobbin ready to go on my wheel, it's time to attach to the leader. The third element that I will be working with is the auto wrapping thread. The thread that I'll be working with is a metallic thread from Sewology, and it was something I had hanging around, but I thought that this black with metallic gold would look fabulous with this bright yellow and orange yarn. Here it is up close. I'll put the color number and description of all the materials that I'm using in the description box down below. This white thread is my core. It is pre-twisted onto a bobbin. Next to that, I have the single that I'll be plying onto this leader, and I have my thread in a bowl, and that will be auto wrapped as I spin. This is how I attach everything to the leader. I hold my single, my core, and my auto wrapping thread all together, and I'm just gonna put an overhand knot into the end. That keeps it together and prevents it from coming apart. It just makes it easier to set up. Next, I'm going to get it all attached to my leader, and I do that by putting the whole bundle through the end of my loop on my leader and I fold it over. I'll put some twist in it to get it started and we're off. All right, so once it's gone just a little ways, I'm going to let go of my auto wrapping thread. It's going to do its own thing back and forth right here as we go along. To add my coils, I will push the yarn from my single onto my core as if I was core spinning, and then I will shove the whole thing forward towards the orifice. There is a lot of tension on this spin and you want to make sure of a couple things. One of the things you want to be sure of is that your spinning wheel has a strong take-up. You also want to be sure that you're using a very strong core. As I go, you can see how different effects in your single will give you different effects in your final yarn. If you have a very thin area in your single, it's going to come up as a smaller coiled area on your final yarn. If you have a thicker single, it's going to come up as a thicker area on your final yarn. And if you have a thick and thin, like I do, you're going to have that varied texture all along. If your single is very tightly spun, you're going to have very defined coils in your final yarn. If your single is loosely spun, it's going to fluff up as you go along, and you'll have less defined coils. Here we come to some of the locks that I spun. Oh, this is so pretty. I love how this looks. That's awesome. Oh, I'm so excited. This is the sunshine that I wanted. Bright and cheerful today. The closer to the 90-degree point that you add your single onto your core, the tighter your coils will stay. The more that you run your yarn along with your core, the more it's going to fluff up. So you can direct your design how you want it, if you want it to remain a very tight and defined coil, or if you want it to fluff up and have a little bit more texture to it by changing your angle, running along with your core and pushing it farther, or doing more of a 90-degree angle and not pushing it quite as far. Do we like how this is looking on the bobbin? I sure do. I am loving this. It's like a bumblebee. I think it's a bumblebee yarn. I love it. I did include some very thin diameter areas of my single because I wanted to show that this does not have to be a super bulky yarn. It is possible to do this yarn much thinner depending on the diameter of your core and the diameter of your single. In fact, I had a little leftover of this style of yarn that I spun a few years ago, and I wanted to show you. I use it as the as the tie-on for my orifice hook, and here is the gauge so that you can see how thin this is. It does have energy and it likes to ply up on itself, but the individual strands, as you can see, are very small. Don't let the idea that art yarns have to be bulky throw you off from trying this technique. This yarn I spun on my Ashford Traditional without the bulky setup. It was just the regular standard Ashford flyer and orifice hole. And clearly, success! This is a reminder to hit that thumbs up if you find my tutorials helpful, and if you'd like to see more tutorials every Tuesday, make sure that you're subscribed. I also go live on Fridays and answer spinning questions as well as talk about whatever projects I have going on. So make sure your notification is turned on if you'd like to join me in a live. I'm going to finish up this spin. Then I'll show you how I can remove some of the excess twist that has built up in this yarn by plying it with a sequined thread. Now that I've finished making the coils and auto wrapping this yarn, I'm going to thread ply with a sequined thread. This yarn has so much energy in it. It'll be a lot easier to work with once some of that is taken out with the thread ply. I want to make sure that my coils and my thread that I'll be plying are separated down on the floor so that they don't tangle up before I'm ready for them to twist together. So to start this, I do the same as I did before. I put the two plies together, the thread and the coils, and get it going on my leader. Now I just want to make sure the direction of my twist has to be the opposite. And we got caught. That's what I want to watch out for. I don't want it to spend a lot of time outside of the wheel gaining extra twist in the other direction. I just want to undo some of the twist. This technique also lets some of that thread ply that we had going on bubble up, and it can get caught if you have hooks. So if you feel all of a sudden that your take up has stopped, check your hooks because you probably have some thread stuck. I've come to the end of the spin now, and boy did I have to pack it onto that bobbin. So I have this yarn attached to my leader down here, and then I also have the thread that I've been plying with. This is very simple to remove. I'm just going to pull this off where I had threaded it and folded it over, and then I'll give it one last twist and cut the thread. I'll finish winding on so it all comes up through the orifice. Now that I have plied this yarn, I can see that while it does still have some energy, it's nowhere near as twisted up as it was before I plied it with the thread. So this is a great technique to take some of the energy out of your yarn if you feel that your core spinning has overspun or over twisted your yarn, and it's a wonderful way to add a lot of texture and other unique elements like this sequin in the sequin thread. Another great thing about this yarn is that you don't have to pre-twist your core if you don't want to, because you can use the thread plying after you've made your coils to take out some of that extra twist. I'm really enjoying how this high contrast thread looks with these coils on this yarn. I think it's really cool. This yarn is going to go home to Allie with the golden threads. This series of core spinning videos has been a collaboration. This is the final yarn of all the core spinning yarns that I have done, and I really hope she enjoys it. I will include links to the golden threads in the description down below. What should we call this yarn? Is it Sunshine? Is it a bumblebee? Think of a good name for this yarn and leave me a comment down below. This yarn does eat up a lot of yardage. From the original bobbin that I had spun with my single on it, I ended up with about 40 yards or 36 meters. So it did reduce the yardage by quite a lot, but it also did bulk it up by quite a lot. I think that my favorite way to use this style of yarn is in a woven piece of fabric. If you use oversized needles or a large crochet hook, this can also be a great kind of yarn to use as a border for a hat or a stripe on a cowl. You can use this type of yarn for any kind of fun accent, and it's definitely open for a lot of creative possibilities. I hope that this spinning project put a little sunshine in your day. Happy spinning, and I'll see you next time.